I then did the same on a larger scale. Okay, this is a larger jar, much wider jar. Let's first determine what should go in here. Okay, so we measure the diameter. We're measuring across. That's about 95 across in diameter. Okay, let's look up our wick chart. We go up our wick chart to 95. Could be a CDN 24 or a 26 is what I would go and buy to make a candle in this jar. Okay, a CDN 24 or a 26. I put a size 8 in here. I put a CDN 8 in here on purpose. Now, if I go and measure the diameter of the tunnel here, it matches up. That tunnel is about 6 centimeters across, okay? If we look up 6, oh, just under. So a CDN 8 or a CDN 10 can burn 6 centimeters across. So the CDN 8 that I put in the jar has burnt the maximum it could burn. Again, candle maker's error, putting the wrong size wick that's too small in a large jar. Okay, now hopefully that's like, oh my God, is it that? You know, we don't even realize that when we buy candles that, you know, it's just as simple as putting, the candle maker has put the wrong size wick in there. So let's talk about what happens when we put a wick. This is what happens when the wick is too small. Now I want to talk about what happens when the wick is too big, okay? Because it can be quite dangerous. It's very important for you to understand this. So first up, let's work with this medium jar for the moment. We'll first work out what should go in there, okay? So I'm going to measure the diameter. And when I measure the diameter, I'm measuring from inside to inside. I don't measure all the way across from the outside to the outside because your glass walls are quite thick and the soy wax and the wick isn't burning through the walls. So you just make sure you measure from the inside to the inside. So as I measure this one is going to be about 65 in diameter across. Okay, 65 is about a size CDN 14, okay? So typically, if I was making this for the first time, I'd go get myself a CDN 14 to put in here for my first burn. Now, if you remember, this one was the size 24 because it was 95 across, okay? See how big that is? Wow, so much wider. So what would happen if I put a size 24 wick in this jar that's only designed to take a size 14? Can you hazard a couple of guesses? Okay, I want you to think about the wick as your heat source. Your wick is your heat source. Think about your wick like a heater in a room. The smaller the heater, the less heat. The bigger the heater, the more it can pump out. Okay, so now if I've got a small environment and a large heat source, that could be a combination for something that's not so good, okay? So essentially what happens when the wick can't burn in diameter wide as it needs to, it starts burning that way faster, okay? So essentially putting a large wick in a small jar will create a whole lot more heat. It will burn ultra fast. It will have a whole lot more smoke come off it. And it will give you a very deep melt pool. And did you know that the melt pool you get when you burn your candles, you know, when you light your candle, you wait for a couple of hours, the melt pool develops. That melt pool of liquefied wax should never be deeper than 2 centimeters. 1.5 is actually safe. 2 is maximum, okay? So as that candle burns down, that melt pool should never be deeper than 2 centimeters. It might get deeper down here, but that's just because it gets so hot down at the bottom here. But as it's burning like so. So if you've been burning a candle and half the jar is liquefied, that's a potentially dangerous candle. That means the heat source, the wick inside that jar, is way too big for that jar, okay? So this is why You must use your wick guide, and you must stay within the safe parameters. You can't just go, oh, it's asking for a 14, but I haven't got a 14. I'll just put a 24 in there. Doesn't work that way. You can safely go 1 up and 1 down, sometimes 2 up. So say if it was a 14, okay, 16, potentially 18. If I was putting an 18 in this, I would definitely be test burning it and watching it, because other things that can happen if the wick is too big for the jar, and it's quite scary. Number one is the fire. A fire can start because that heat source is now heating up that wax and that fragrance really, really hot, much hotter than it should be. And just put in the wrong environments, a fire can start. But what happens typically before that is the candle jar cracks and sometimes explodes. Just depends at what stage. Typically, if the candle's still quite full, it'll just crack all over because the heat source is way too hot for that jar and that small environment. Because it doesn't matter if you've got something that's heat resistant. Remember, all our candle jars are made to have candles put in them, but under the right parameters, under the right specifications. It's like anything. Everything's built with maximum loads. And once you go past the maximum load, it breaks, okay? So putting a wick in a jar that's too small, for the wick's too small and the jar's too big, will tunnel. Putting a wick in a jar, for putting a large wick in a jar that's too small, will potentially start a fire and will potentially crack your jars, okay? So it's about finding the right balance.